following up on that shooting at the Taft Union High School. And the story is that at 9 o'clock in the morning, this student walked in, shot another student who was in serious condition, was airlifted to Bakersfield Hospital. Apparently, a teacher was hit by a stray pellet. That's the minor wound that didn't need to be treated, and why they said there were 2 people shot. More than a few people were commenting on just how much showed up there. There were 3 ambulances, the medevac helicopter. A lot of people showed up there. The story now is that 20-minute gap between when the shooting started and when the suspect was actually taken into custody. They're now saying that the other students and teachers talked the shooter out of his shotgun. I'm not entirely sure I believe that one, but here's the one that is really going to bake your noodle tonight. It turns out there was a lockdown drill simulating an attack by a school shooter at that very school just 1.5 hours before the shooter showed up. It's been posted to a lot of blogs. I did some digging because I didn't believe it. I just found a confirmation out of WISTV.com. And they're saying it's just a coincidence that the school participated in lockdown training just an hour and a half before the shooting actually happened. I think this was supposed to be another big bloody school massacre for Biden to wave around and say, we've got to grab the guns, and somehow or other it didn't work out. All righty, we're going to go to John in Tennessee. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, thank you, Michael. This Aurora shooting, do you not find it strangely coincidental that there was a preview for Gangster Mob, and today, as they're meeting in Washington with gun rights advocates, today's the premiere, Michael, of Gangster Mob. And as far as the drugs involved in Connecticut, I could have told you that it was the psychotropics that the guy was on. And going back to Aurora, to the shooting in Aurora, when you're talking about a guy that was involved in studies that had to do not with psychology but with neuroscience, he was no idiot. Is it possible, Michael, that he was involved in some sort of a not a training necessarily, but a research project, and that this was all planned? I don't think there's any doubt when you look at.
Let me tell you where I'm coming from, because I've gotten a lot of emails from people saying you're not paying attention to the obvious stage setup of Sandy Hook and everything. Yeah, I am, but I don't want to get involved in arguing back and forth over what we think actually happened on the ground. My focus is what it's being used for. And when we realize that this is a desperate grab by the government for our Second Amendment rights to protect ourselves from the government, then I'm sure that the gun grabbers would love us to argue in circles endlessly over where the 223 was found, where there are additional shooters, and go back and forth about that stuff endlessly, which means we're not devoting energy to standing up for our Second Amendment rights. And that's the reason I'm not getting into this stuff. I'm not saying it wasn't staged. I'm not saying it wasn't a setup. Certainly this idea that this Taft Union High School had a simulated shooting drill just an hour and a half before the real shooting, that it doesn't get more obvious than that. But it's beside the point. This is an attempt to bring about dictatorship in the United States of America with a heavily armed, warmongering government desperate for more of your money, trying to disarm the American people. And that is where we're going to keep our focus.
Okay, one more thing, if I can. Just going to the definition of the names of Aurora. Aurora was the ancient goddess of the dawn. And don't you find it also strangely coincidental that the name of the movie was The Dark Knight Rises, over the city of the goddess of the dawn? I think
that's completely irrelevant to the issue of preserving our gun rights against tyrannical government. I'm sorry, it's a side issue, and we have more important things to discuss. Okay, so thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. We have to stay on focus. We have to stay on focus. We have a financial system on the verge of collapse. We have money junkies who are saying the only way that they can keep their little system going a little bit longer is for all of the wealth of the American people to be harvested and given to the banks, which means the American people reduced to serfs. No more private ownership of property by the American people. All the property will belong to the government, go on their balance sheet, and the only way they can do that is to disarm the American people. And that's what they're trying to do. The instant you lose your guns, you will have lost your nation. It is that up front. And so anybody who's trying to get you to argue about symbolic links to the movies or how many shooters can dance on the head of a birch tree in the back, they're there to keep you off point, off focus. That Second Amendment, your right to keep and bear arms, that's the focus. Don't let yourself get distracted from that. It's very important. This is the make or break point. If they can't get America to give up their guns, then we truly are in the final days of the United States of America. Because they can't impose draconian tax increases and wealth confiscation on an armed population. All right, we're going to grab another phone call. Alex in Texas. Aloha. Alex, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, aloha, Mike. This is Alex again. I was calling you because I just heard you say something in regards to the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting, and you didn't know as to why that all of a sudden there was another, somebody had seen some shooter there. And
no, I didn't say that. I said I didn't care. I said I don't.
No, I understand. No, I understand that, sir. The reason I'm calling is because I think that it's forces within the government fighting each other, and they just don't want to tell you. Because if there's a declaration that the government's been subverted, each state will go their own way, and the union will dissolve. So
worse things could happen.
I don't disagree with you, but I do believe that it is the forces fighting each other, and that's exactly why we aren't being told what's going on and that's exactly why we're not being clarified as to what the situation at that school was, because I believe it was a false flag attempt. It started to initiate a civil war within this nation, and I believe that there was forces that caught wind of this and put a stop to it. Now the same forces, they're fighting each other to find
Okay, well, let me respond to that. Let me respond to that. I do not think the United States government wants to start a civil war, because right now, if a civil war were to start with the American people as heavily armed as they are, it is not a guarantee that the U.S. federal government would win, especially because the rank-and-file military can't be counted on to side with the government against the American people. I think what the agenda here is to disarm the American people so that when the U.S. government starts shooting and rounding us up, they can do it very, very easily. The reason for the American people to hang on to their weapons is not to start a civil war, but to deter the federal government from starting one. And again, looking at how heavily they're pushing this thing, I'm smelling panic inside the Beltway. I'm smelling panic right now. They're going to hit the debt ceiling middle of February. Nobody's buying this $1 trillion coin. Foreign investment in the United States has fallen off by something like a third. Other nations are trying to delink from the American economy. These are the final days of the Federal Reserve and the federal government. The only way that they will prolong their reign is to end the republic and bring about a true fascist dictatorship. And the only way they can do that is if the American people are convinced to give up their guns. And I don't think that's going to happen. We're seeing these, huge sales of assault-style, military-style weapons into the hands of the people. And yes, the U.S. government has much more lethal weapons, but they don't have as many bodies. Even the entire U.S. standing army is 1 million people against 300 million American citizens. And again, in the court of world opinion, if the U.S. government launches war on its own people, that was the reason the U.S. government was giving to go into places like Libya. So right now, from a political point of view, from a geopolitical point of view, the U.S. government cannot launch a war of aggression against the American people without discrediting it itself completely before the rest of the world and basically ending all excuse and justification for their wars of conquest. So that's why we're seeing this push for disarming the American people so they can keep things sort of going on the way they are, Keep the Ponzi scheme bank going on the way they are. They're already talking about these major tax increases. Obama's still calling for a carbon tax. It only works if the American people are disarmed. And I am so happy to see the American people just digging their heels in. But you need to remember something very, very carefully. The federal government loves to play dirty. They don't play honest. They don't tell the truth. They don't follow the rules. They have only one rule: survive and control. And they will lie, cheat, steal, and kill to get their way. And we need to be ready for that. That's why this story about these two guys up in Portland walking around with assault rifles, making everybody nervous, I don't think those are real supporters of the Second Amendment. I think they're FBI informants or some other kind of hired agent provocateur that are part of this campaign, along with Alex Jones, to portray supporters of the Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights as dangerous kooks who have to be disarmed to protect the nation. We're not the dangerous kooks. The ones on CNN screaming that Alex Jones have to be shot, they're the dangerous kooks. The ones who think torture is cool, they're the dangerous kooks. The ones sending drones into other countries to blow up innocent children, they're the dangerous kooks, not us. We are trying to hold this government to the letter of the law, the Constitution of the United States of America, and the Bill of Rights. Why? Because all of those people in Washington, D.C., who swore an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution broke that oath. And so we have to take that oath. We have to uphold it. We have to stand for that fact. Everybody listening to this show, raise your right hand. You there in Ohio, right hand, right hand. And just repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America from all enemies, both foreign and domestic. That is the new oath of we, the American people. Because that Constitution is ours. It doesn't belong to the government. They don't own it. They don't have any right to change it. Look up at the very top of that document. The first three words written extra large and extra proud. We, the people. That's our framework for the government. And if the government is not willing to obey that, they are neither legal nor legitimate. And that's why they're trying to convince you to give up the guns, so they can shred that contract. We already saw those trial balloons. New York Times, MSNBC, it's time to get rid of the Constitution. It's not up to you. It's not your Constitution. It belongs to we the people. And we the people do not grant you our permission to break the contract. Anyway, it is amazing how hard they're pushing this, and I think it betrays a great deal of fear. A great deal of fear. The American people are very angry, and again, I would love to avoid a violent confrontation, because the wrong people always get hurt on those things. But at this point, it does seem like one is unavoidable, and it does seem like the federal government certainly thinks one is unavoidable, unless they can figure out a way to take away your guns. But you know something? You are the only one who can give up your Second Amendment right. If the government simply says we're taking it back, it was never a right. It was a privilege bestowed by a master on a particularly obedient slave. Rights cannot be rescinded. They can be stolen. But the reason we have a Second Amendment is to protect all the others. Anyway,